Right, now nice hot sunny day, but I ventured inside now to get out of the sun for a bit. So I had a request to do a bit of Van Halen. So I did try this recently actually, but actually scrapped it because I didn't feel it was working totally because there's so much written about this band. But I think the first port of call is just a look at before Van Halen 1 comes out. Obviously so much written about that album, but why is it so good? And I think the key to that is if you check out this book, which is Van Halen Rising. Now, if you read that, if you're interested in Halen rock history, what this author's done is gone and researched Van Halen's early days, and he's tracked down, backyard parties that played, what the sort of gig patterns were when they were mammoth, what the Van Halen brothers were doing, gig-wise and playing-wise, prior to David Roth joining. There's a lot of interesting information on what David Roth was initially like, why they got him in the band principally. He just kept badgering them, and I think he had a PA and he had access to a bit of money and business now. So there was a marriage of convenience there. But what's interesting in it is the criticism of Roth as a frontman. Obviously, we know David Roth, his frontmanship masks his singing inability or lesser ability as a singer. He's not Ronnie James Dio or Steven Tyler or someone like that. And back then he was compared to Jim Dandy of Black Oak, Arkansas. But Eddie Van Halen, obviously there's bootleg recordings going back 75. If you go on YouTube, Van Halen's one of the most covered sort of bands for archive material like bootlegs and old versions of songs. And you can hear Eddie Van Halen's already kind of there, but I think when you listen to the Gene Simmons demos from 76, it doesn't quite come across. It's still not a fully formed beast for the studio. I think live, at the point when they probably first go out on tour for Van Halen 1, I think they've certainly done 300 gigs. It could possibly be 500 or 400 if you look in the Intel in the Van Halen Rising book. It's got lists of gigs and things like that, and I went through it and managed to work out how many gigs they may have done. I think a lot of people who don't play music don't realise, they think it's kind of people are bestowed with gifts, and people are, but what goes into it is a massive amount of practice, and the more drilled and the more practiced a band is, the more fully formed they will arrive. An example of that's AC/DC when they dropped in London in 76, back in the 76 thing, or summer of 76. They'd already done over 500 gigs, so their reputation spread very quickly because it was so well drilled. If we'd seen AC/DC on their 5th gig, we'd probably think, well, what's all the fuss about? Maybe, just when bands first come to the attention and we go, oh, they're amazing, like loads of work that we've not seen has gone into that, and that the Halen brothers were just constantly playing music. I think Eddie Van Halen, there's a kind of 10,000 hour rule with practice of an instrument or sport. And again, looking at his formative years, there's a good chance that he did over 10,000 hours. By the time Van Halen 1 is laid down, he could be past the 11,000, 12,000 hour mark. The guy was just playing it all the time. So there's reasons why the band arrived with such a stunning debut. So there it is, Van Halen 1, the greatest album of 1978, probably the most important hard rock heavy metal album of the back end of the 70s. There's not really, I think, there's loads written about this, so I'm not going to go on about it too much. I think all the tracks are great. I was thinking before, if I had to lose one track, if someone said to me, you've got to take one track off Van Halen 1, and my least favourite track is Little Dreamer, and Little Dreamer's a great track. It's all killer, no filler. I was chatting online the other day, and I think there's maybe half a dozen albums in history where I can say I love every track and they're all at a kind of 10 out of 10 level, and I think this is one such album. I think the final thing in the jigsaw is this is Ted Templeman. After the Gene Simmons demos, he gets him in the studio to do some demos for Warner Brothers, I think, to sort of greenlight the deal to finalise it. I think that kind of fine-tunes them in the studio environment, and then that's taken up a notch. And a lot of these are probably comped together from run-throughs of live backing tracks, and then he's got the best take, and then he's worked really diligently with David Roth and his vocals. I think David Roth gives a great vocal performance on this album. Listen to Running with the Devil. His pitching's really good, his phrasing, his inhaling scream is brilliant, and that opening track, you know, it's probably the best track on the album, and it just kind of sets the tone for what's to come. But I think probably later on, Daily Roth, maybe as the band got bigger, it was maybe harder to get him as disciplined as that, you know, and I think his vocal performance on this, probably the 1984 album, which we come to, so just moving a bit of spit and spat out, has probably got his best vocals on in this era. So yeah, it's a great album. One of my favourite deeper cuts is Feel Your Love Tonight. I read a little article on Ted Templeman the other day, and he said when it cut to the rhythm track on its own after the solo, Eddie Van Halen's rhythm playing, he said he was so tight, he's so in the pocket. And that's the thing about Van Halen, he's equally as great rhythm player and writer as he's a lead guitar player. So yeah, you know, you can read more and find out infinite information on this. So yeah, just the all-time great albums. One of the greatest debut of all time. I think, you know, not a lot comes close. Maybe Led Zeppelin's first album would be up there, and Boston's debut. But Van Halen 1, you know, it basically projects rock into the 1980s. So the sophomore effort, Van Halen 2, it's a really good second album. It's not as good as Van Halen 1. It wasn't going to be. So what it is different. It's got a slightly lighter sound. You know, there's probably, it's kind of a little brighter in a different way. It's kind of more commercial and poppy. You've got Dance the Night Away, and Women in Love, which are really like poppy tracks, which are lovely. Eddie Van Halen has some great guitar piece on this called Spanish Fly, which he plays on a nylon string, and it's just so clean. It's amazing, like, its dexterity. And he does a great tapped harmonic intro on Women in Love. Starts off with a cover. Spat again. It starts off with a cover, You're No Good. I forget who that's by originally, but it's a great cover version that some of the band does really well on the previous album. They did You Really Got Me. Because they've done so much kind of covers and top 40 material in their club days. They're just great at nailing and making a cover track their own. And you got Dance the Night Away, classic pop metal tune. Somebody Get a Bit Dark, that's a classic. Next track, Bottoms Up's the one I don't like. They used to play it live. A lot of people seem to like it. I've just never totally got away with it. Out of Love Again, that's great. That ended side 1. Side 2 was Light Up the Sky. Back then they did on the Van Halen 1, they did an up-tempo track called Atomic Punk, and Light Up the Sky is kind of in that vein. And it's the sort of track they kind of didn't do later on. Really good. Then probably one of the deep cuts, DOA. So this was actually the B-side of Running with the Devil reissue single. So back in 1980, when heavy metal started making waves again, or certainly became solidified as a genre as well, Warner Brothers issued 7-inch singles, and the Van Halen one was Running with the Devil. It had a picture of David Roth on the front in a kind of yellow leather catsuit or something. And the B-side was DOA, so it's a great track. A brilliant riff, great guitar sound on that. Obviously, you know, I didn't talk much about Eddie Van Halen's guitar, rhythm guitar song on Van Halen 1, but there's loads of stuff that goes into detail about that. But, you know, the Brown sound is in full flow on this track. Finishes off with Beautiful Girls, which is a really cool track. This has got my favourite Eddie Van Halen guitar, the black and yellow striped one. That's my favourite of his striped guitars. He had the black and white one on Van Halen 1. So then, the 1980, they're basically doing an album every year here. They go with Women and Children first. This was what first introduced me to them in terms of seeing their albums in a shop in 1980 when I was first getting into rock. So this doesn't have the classic Van Halen logo on the front. It does on the back there, just in the corner, underneath the picture of them. Eddie Van Halen's got a butchered Ibanez Destroyer on the front here that he's just cut loads of bits of wood out. We'll come to a story about him butchering guitars in a sec. So this album, I think the difference with this album is it doesn't have, it's only got one kind of standout single cut on it. Obviously Van Halen 1 that You Really Got Me, Running with the Devil Ain't Talking About Love. Van Halen 2 got Dance the Night Away. I think maybe Somebody Get Me Doctor was a single, or maybe Beautiful Girls, can't remember. This it starts off with And the Cradle Will Rock, and that's the single cut. And that's a great track. The actual main riff's played on a keyboard through a distortion pedal, or some kind of distortion. But it sounds like guitar. But what this album's got, it's got loads of deep cuts. It's like a kind of connoisseur's album. It's very dirty. It's down and dirty. It's gnarly. And it's a really good... if I had to compare it, it's kind of like Master Reality. It's their Master Reality in a way. You know, you've got the first two albums which kind of set the Van Halen sound. And this is the down and dirty third album. The second track's Everybody Wants Some. You might be familiar with that track. It's been used in a couple of film soundtracks. Great song. Third cut's Fools. That's probably my least favourite track on the album. That's kind of like a really gnarly, dirty blues, heavy blues kind of tune. Track 4's Romeo Delight, which is phenomenal. Again, it's a top up-tempo track. It's got great rhythm work on it. Davey Roth's in top form. Then there's a little instrumental, Tora Tora, and then that goes into Lost in Control, which is a bonkers, super fast track. Then you got one of my favourite cuts, Take Your Whiskey Home. This has got a great kind of blues acoustic intro with Davey Roth scatting over the top, doing great stuff, and then it comes in with a really cool riff. It's got a great groove. And then the band really surprised you on the 8th track, Could This Be Magic? Not sure what open tuning he's using, slide, but it's kind of steel string acoustic. It's almost like an acoustic sort of jazzy, country kind of blues tune. Really good. It just sounds like they've taken an old song and made it their own, but I think it's an original. And then the final track, In a Simple Rhyme's got quite a nice Who vibe. That was a track I was never fussed with for years, but it's a really great track. The sort of song that only they could do. They've got that ability to do a hard-hitting rocking tune, but just put a summery Californian vibe to it. Obviously, things like the vocal harmonies are a big part of the Van Halen sound. Both Eddie Van Halen and Mike Anthony do the backing vocals, and often they'll sing the sort of main backing vocal while Davey Roth sits out. But one thing with him is Michael Anthony is one of the outstanding backing singers. He's got a great top range, a lot of power, and he's just got a blend. And that's something that other rock metal bands didn't have, that kind of Beach Boys thing. And coming from California, I think, it gave them that summery sound. To me, when I listen to Van Halen, it's like I'm kind of in some kind of endless summer. Okay, so this is their next album. I mentioned AC/DC before. Interesting, AC/DC's 4th album is Power Age. That's their kind of connoisseur's favourite. It's also their worst selling album of the classic era. That's Bon and Brian in America, and so is this for Van Halen, the 4th album, Fair Warning. But for many people, this is their best album. I would still say Van Halen 1's the best because it's so consistent. I think this runs, a close second. I think the difference is it just tails off. The last 2 tracks don't totally do it for me. But basically this time things are getting tense in the band between Eddie Van Halen and Davey Roth. So Eddie Van Halen's kind of got a lot of anger on this album, I think, and basically probably takes over a bit. His rhythm guitar sound on this is probably the brownest his brown sound sounded, and it's one of the great rhythm guitar sounds. So the album opens with Mean Streets, which has got a fantastic slapped tapped harmonic intro. It's actually an old riff that they reworked. I think it's called Voodoo something or other. Can't remember. If you go on YouTube, you'll find it. It's a superb track. It's absolutely brilliant. Next track, Dirty Movies, has got a fantastic slide guitar intro. Basically, Eddie Van Halen recording in the studio. He's using a Gibson, I think it's a Les Paul Junior, something like that, and he couldn't access the fret high enough, so he cut the bottom horn off. They just butchered it there and then. It's got a great slide part. It's one of my all-time favourite Van Halen tracks. It's got a fantastic groove on it. Great sort of syncopation. Brilliant middle section, really funny. It's just a great song, and the backing vocals, brilliant. And when the track comes in, it just lifts you. Then you got Sinner's Swing, which is another great up-tempo track with a brilliant solo. And it finishes off with Hear About It Later. Again, got a poppy element to it, and some of the band do so well. So that finished side 1, it's just classic, brilliant Halen. Side 2 open with Unchained, which for many people is the greatest Van Halen riff ever. It's one of the all-time riffs ever. It's in the drop D tuning. The guitar sounds phenomenal. there's a great breakdown in the middle of this, and you can hear Ted Templeman sort of having a go at David Roth over the mic, having a laugh on. It's just an all-time classic. A little story about that, when I was younger, I used to ride BMX, so this is how I kind of got back into rock and got into guitar. I came in the house one day, and I knew a BMX feature was coming up on some kids program, so I'd be 13 going on 14, and the guy called Craig Campbell from the Skyway freestyle team was doing some aerial tricks, and then some music came on, and obviously that was the underscore to the clip. I thought, that sounds amazing. I said to my brother, who's that? And he goes, it's Unchained by Van Halen. And I'd already heard the track 4 years before, because a neighbour, when we lived another house, had bought over the Fair Warning album. But that time I couldn't always totally get to grips with Van Halen. It was maybe too American sounding for me, and the guitar sounded kind of strange, the solos. But anyway, I went out and bought the album probably that weekend or the weekend after from my local record shop for the Princey Summer 325, and that got us back into guitar. I'd had a previous go at it, and that's started it all off for me. Push Comes to Shove's next, nice sort of reggae kind of vibe. They're probably picking up on stuff like the Police are doing, and really good cool solo on this. There's a nice sort of legato thing, again just a cool mood. Then So This Is Love, again a total great upbeat pop metal track, pop hard rock track. So then it just finishes with Sunday Afternoon in the Park, which is a weird instrumental, and One Foot Out the Door, which is kind of a synth, up-tempo synth track. They're good, they're interesting. It just, the other Van Halen albums finish so strongly, and that's the only thing that really lets it down for me. But it's a great record. It's just it's a deeper album. Okay, so after that they make what people consider the weakest album of the classic Roth era, which is Diver Down, and it is. After the Eddie Van Halen probably taking control more on the Fair Warning album, they do this, and this has got more cover versions on it. Too many, really. And that causes friction again, I think, with David Roth, Eddie Van Halen. I really like this record. I mean, it's Van Halen after all. I love it. Where Have All the Good Times Gone's a Kinks cover, which is they put their own stamp on. Then there's a great up-tempo track, probably the album's strongest, or one of the strongest original tracks on the album's Hang 'em High. A lot of little instrumentals on this album. So you've got Cathedral, which is a little kind of, he's using a digital delay, and the volume swells. It's really cool. Then you've got Secrets, which is a light acoustic pop track, which is great. Great fun to play that chord progression. Then there's Intruder, which is kind of a synth track with weird guitar effects on, which works really, it's really cool. Then they do a cover of Pretty Woman, which was a big hit for them. This album was actually a much bigger hit than Fair Warning. It's a bigger hit than Women and Children, actually. Probably Van Halen too. In actual fact, this album did very well for them. Probably on the back of the Pretty Woman single, and that they did a video for that in the early days of MTV. They put their own stamp on that. And then there's a really controversial cover next. Is the Dancing in the Street, which is almost got a disco synth vibe. I like it. I like what they do with it. It's got a great solo. So I've never minded that track. Then you've got Little Guitars as an intro to that. It's a stunning Van Halen thing. He basically picks with one hand and does something with this. Brilliant. The track Little Guitars is brilliant. Great Michael Anthony backing vocals on that. That's probably, maybe the album's best cut, that. Then there's Big Bad Bill, Sweet William Now, which is a cover version, and that features their daddy and Van Halen on clarinet. It's good fun, it's great. Then there's The Full Bug, which is an up-tempo rocker. And then it finishes with a cover of Quicksilver Messenger Services, Happy Trails. It's then harmonising in the studio, having a laugh. And again, the album just finishes on a lot of fun. It's a light album. It's a terrible album cover. But, I'd still give it an 8.5 out of 10. If I was marking the albums out of 10, Van Halen 1 10 out of 10. Van Halen 2 a 9. Women and Children first a 9, Fair Warning a 9, Diver Down 8, 8.5. So the next one is their next most commercially successful album alongside Van Halen 1. So after the sort of traumas of the too many covers on Diver Down, Eddie Van Halen, enough is enough. He builds his own studio, 5150 studio at his home, and buries himself away, and they produced this album in 1984. So I'll get my sort of thing out of the way with this. I think some people are a bit down on this album because it's kind of got Jump on, and it's pop, and it's very commercial. But I think it's a brilliant record. I think every single track's a gem. I think the production's great. I think Daily Roth gives his best vocal performance since Van Halen 1. He's knuckling under the discipline. Eddie Van Halen plays fantastic, and the drums and bass, everything's great. So obviously we've got 1984, we've got Jump. Jump, great pop track, really turned me on to the band. Initially back in 83 before getting Fair Warning, I think, that track. I was at a wedding last year and they played Jump as the first dance and had it blasting through a big PA, and it just sounded fantastic. So I don't tire of the track. Panama, people know that track, it's great. Then you've got two great deep cuts on the album, Top Jimmy, which is a sort of up-tempo, fun rocker. It's kind of got a bit of a rock and roll vibe, I don't know, can't really describe it. And then Drop Dead Legs, which is a great song, got a great riff. The second side of the album with Hot for Teacher. One from this album, in the MTV era, the videos did great business for the band, and the Hot for Teacher is a classic video. Captures the whole Van Halen spirit really well, even though obviously there's ruptions occurring in the band. Hot for Teacher, classic track, fantastic drum intro, amazing guitar. Then you got I'll Wait, which is sort of the forgotten track. This was the kind of fourth single. And for a while I didn't kind of, I wasn't as fussed with it. I think one of my mates kind of put me off it. He was like, oh, you shouldn't be playing synthesizer. But it's a lovely song, great vocal by Daily Roth, brilliant solo, really cool chord progression. When I was younger, I had the album taped off the vinyl, and I would jam over the intro to I'll Wait, because the changes are kind of shift modally, muso speak, and it helped me develop my ear, and switching between different scales and so forth. The second last track, Girl Gone Bad's great, got a great tapped harmonic intro. It's brilliant, that. And then it finishes with House of Pain, which is a reworking of an old track which was on the Gene Simmons demos. In actual fact, that's where the Running with the Devil horn comes from. If you listen to the Gene Simmons demos, the horn sound on Running with the Devil is actually on House of Pain. And yeah, it's a superb track. So I just think, it's close to a 10, that. So even though I'd sort of pick Fair Warning second because I need those tracks, it's a really consistent, polished album. Again, it's an all killer, no filler for me. And I like sort of the commercial element, great album cover. So that initially ended the Daily Roth era. I'll just quickly just jumping back to Van Halen 1, because I didn't really talk about the tracks much because I think they've gone over that and other areas. But that opening Running with the Devil, that horn comes in, the bass, boom, 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 the guitar comes in, it's all there. Brilliant record. Right, so the basically they part coming with Daily Roth. Sammy Hagar comes in. We'll look at that in a separate thing. Daily Roth comes back to do a couple of tracks on Van Halen's Greatest Hits in 1996, and those two tracks are Me, Wives, Magic and Can't Get This Stuff No More, and they're really good vocals. The riffing's great. It's very mastered, very loud. And their track's worth checking out. They're supposed to get back together. They appear on MTV or something on like an awards thing, and it all goes pear-shaped in a limousine or something. So Daily Roth goes again without really coming back, and then they get back together 2007. They do tours, and then they produce this album in 2012, which is different kind of truth. So the day this, the week this came out was pure joy for me and a lot of Van Halen fans. I was pretty obsessed with the record at the time. I think I played it, daily for the several weeks. Looking at it now, I think at the time I was maybe like, oh, it's maybe better than Diver Down, and it's in terms of sound, I would say it's picking up where kind of Women and Children and Fair Warning were at. It's kind of a bit down and dirty. It's not classic. It's got the classic Van Halen sound. In a lot of places, I think the production lets it down a bit. I think it's at that time when, because of iTunes, bands are putting too much bottom end on the mixes because they're thinking people are just listening to shitty MP3s. Since then, streaming's got a better memory size, file size for music, and people have better equipment to listen to. So it suffers from an oversized bottom end and the mastering too high. It opened with Tattoo, and then Tattoo was released as the first single, which I think a lot of people thought was a mistake. I really like the track, but the second track, She's a Woman, should have been the first single, because that's absolutely ripping. That's an unused track, that's from the Gene Simmons demos, and in actual fact 6 or 7 of the riffs on this and tracks are reworked tracks from the olden days. So either they didn't have enough new ideas, or they just decided they wanted to channel that classic sound. But I like every track on this. As Tattoo, She's a Woman, You and Your Blues, that's a really good track. Chinatown, that's got great drumming by Alex. Blood and Fire, it's really good. Bullet Head. As Is, yeah, is that the one I'm not? No, I like As Is. Out of Space, that's good fun. It's The Trouble with Never, that's the one I'm not as keen on. Honey Baby Sweetie Doll, that's cool. Eddie uses a whammy pedal on that, and he manages to take that and make it his own. And then you've got Stay Frosty, that's kind of like Ice Cream Man. On Van Halen one, there's a track called Ice Cream Man, which has got a great acoustic intro, and it's in that vein. And it finishes with Big River and Beach Working. One of those, I think it's Big River's got a great solo, probably the best solo. I would say Tattoo's actually got a great solo. Eddie Van Halen's lead work on this, it's great, but it's not, not at the level that it was. In the classic Roth era, he's basically leading the way for several years when he wins Guitar Player magazine's best player 5 years running. I don't think anyone's done that in the rock category in history. So this was, I think now I'd probably say this is 7 out of 10. I think at the time it was maybe going over an 8, but maybe it's 7.5. It is a good comeback record. But then sadly, they did a couple of tours, Eddie Van Halen got ill, and then things went quiet again, and obviously there's rumours about his health, so whether anything will happen again, weirdly later on they released this live at the Tokyo Dome. It just kind of came out. It's quite interesting, this is a double album. There's kind of been no effort really made on the packaging, I'll just turn it that way. But I haven't listened to it much, but what's interesting about it, it's a proper warts and all. They've obviously just, recorded a few shows and then just picked the best ones. And there's no touch-ups. There's a great ad-lib by Daily Roth on Untitled Rock. He does a brilliant ad-lib. And it kind of captures the band in warts. And also it's quite interesting from that point of view, because obviously live albums are always touched up. So that's a classic Van Halen era. They are one of the greatest, most important bands in the history of rock. I know a lot of people don't like them, and I know some people don't get them. And I suppose it's like that thing, I quite like a bit of Led Zeppelin, but I'm not Led Zeppelin mad. And I suppose, you get a band like Metallica, you get these important bands, and sometimes they connect with some people and don't connect with others. It's well worth checking out, just buy, as a starting point, buy, Van Halen 1 and 1984, that's a good place to start, and then just delve into the other ones. Cheers.